We are doing total costing today. We have Claire, Riley, Weston, and myself, Austin. Sorry about that, Weston. From the reading that we did, what is total costing? What do you know about it so far?
It involves a lot more than just dollars and cents that you see on when someone gives you a price for something. There are a lot of elements that go into it, and companies that don't really consider those costs are kind of setting themselves up to fail.
Okay. So would you say the cheapest is not always the best? Is that kind of what you're...
Well, cheapest may not always be the cheapest.
Thank you. I like that. I like that. We've got a picture here, and it says, know it or pay. So can everyone say that with me?
Know it or pay.
Okay, what do we have to know?
It.
What's the it part?
Basically, you have to know the cost through every different function, like through the entire product life cycle. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for costs that you don't get.
Chat again.
Well, something that pops in my mind is for all those that have had the quality management class with Fonabelle, where he talks about the book that was written as quality is free. When it's talking about the implications of that, it may be like you can go with the cheaper option, but in all honesty, that cheaper option is going to cost you a lot more, and your quality that you're going to provide to customers is actually free when you do the total cost of ownership and look at the implications of what you're buying and how it affects your process and your product.
Right, so throughout the process there's lots of transportation, actually buying the product, learning how on the product, what are we actually buying, we have to know, or else we're going to pay. And pay is not only what we're going to pay with cash, right? So if you buy a product and say you have to return it and it had bad parts in there or whatnot, you may lose the customer. So this is not just what you're paying, it's also what the customers are paying. And with that, we're going to go to a slide here with cars. Everyone's bought a car, right? Have you ever thought or asked yourself, what is the total cost of this car going to cost me over 5 years? You have?
No, just thought about it a little bit. Hadn't really
Okay.
too deep into it.
And I'm sorry, we only have 12 minutes. I can't take every hand here. Which one is going to be the lowest cost over the 5 years?
What's the financing rate?
All the same.
Average.
Yeah.
A.
And we got this from Kelly Blue Book. Who said A? Why is that?
Probably better gas mileage, probably less maintenance. When you're taking the total cost, you're looking at all those type of things. So I'm assuming that the Mitsubishi who buys those, right? So obviously the truck's going to get less gas mileage. Tires are more expensive, so wear and tear is going to be a lot more over the 5 years.
Okay, so you're saying Toyota's going to be the least. You're saying the truck's going to be the most.
Between the truck and the Mitsubishi.
Okay, does anyone else have any other opinion? Take one more if there is.
I'm kind of going off brand names here, and that may be a bad, dangerous way to go, but I would probably say Toyota and the Nissan going for on the Mitsubishi, just because I know that obviously Toyota, they're one of the leading companies and they do put a lot of effort into their newer cars and everything like that, and they are really committed to their quality. I don't know that I know that about Mitsubishi or Nissan much.
Okay, so we're not sure on the Nissan or the Mitsubishi here. Here's the answer. A, yes, of course, is right. $28,000 is going to be the total cost over the 5 years. But surprisingly, the truck beats out the Mitsubishi here. And why is that? Because of depreciation. That's one thing we didn't talk about. We talked about gas mileage with one of them. But the depreciation here, you can see, is a lot more. So if you don't know it, you're going to have to...
A.
Okay, so we just kind of talked about the different factors that are involved with owning a car for 5 years. So if you're paying attention, their fuel and their on the slide, we've got fuel, insurance, your state fees, your financing, all the stuff that goes into your financing, and then also on top of that, you just got maintenance. I bought a car once and the engine was bad, so I had to get that all figured out. All those things play into a factor. You got to think about that when you're buying a car. So now we need to kind of take the transition of this is what we do as consumers and as people generally. We all buy our cars, and so kind of remember these 8 different factors that play into a role of buying a car, and kind of start to think about how to transition those into a role as a purchaser. So if we go into the next slide, we see that. So the question is, what is total costing? And we kind of went over that earlier. Chad, what was it that you said that costs associated with the acquisition process. And so, based off of our last slide of, we had fuel, maintenance, all that stuff. As a purchaser, if you are purchasing a product, what would those costs be? What are some things you can think of?
I think that some things you gotta consider are, costs of when things go wrong. So you have a lot of these companies that don't kind of design their supply chain to be redundant, or when something goes wrong, it can cost them a lot more than one that is very good about making their supply chain really robust. And those are kind of hard to quantify, but those are something I want to look at.
Value costs, so that's one of the ones that we came up with. Does anybody else have anything else they can think of? That if you were a purchaser, what would you want to take into consideration?
I mean, I would say stuff like the quality of the product, how long it's going to last, what their defect rate is. I would say, where they're located. So, like you have transportation. I mean, you can buy it from one place. It might cost a little bit more at Chad's point, but you can buy it closer. It's a little bit more, but the offset of the transportation is a wash, or maybe it's better.
So we really need to take into account everything as we're looking at purchasing a product. And as we do so, we start to know what our costs are, so we don't have to pay those extra costs if we don't need to.
So we want to talk about a best practice and a total costing, and we wanted to do GM and their ignition switches. Now I hope I'm getting a few blank stares of why this might be happening, because if you've read in the news, you know that this is not a best practice, it's actually a worse practice. They really is, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but they totally fail on their costing. If they would have known it, they could have saved a ton of money. So they had these faulty ignition switches, and they came out in 2005. They figured out that it was happening. It affected 2.6 million cars, and it's been in the news, and it's really, really big. When they were looking into this, they never met specifications, and has subsequently it's cost them a lot. So in 2005, there was a lot of emails going back and forth from these engineers that these parts were wrong, and that they could fail. And they didn't really take any action, but they took a little bit of action. They sent a letter out to all the dealerships and said to have your people take your keys. So I think mine's a minor place, but you have your key, and you've got your one key for your car, but then you dangling everything else. So they said you need to take all that weight off so that it doesn't break the ignition switch. Well, I know that I've seen people, I know my wife has a lot more, and you've got your Disneyland last trip, you've got a picture of your dog, you've got your memento from who knows what, and it's all dangling there on the keys. Well, that was causing these ignitions to fail, and then when they fail, you'd be driving down the road, there'd be a car crash, you'd slam into the car, your airbags wouldn't deploy, you'd get ejected, and you'd die. So that's kind of, that's what happened, and it's a really big deal. And to change it, if we go to the costs here, or the recall happened in 2004, or 2014, so it's about a decade span. Like I said, it affected 2.6 million cars. And a little bit of costs. So had they switched it in 2004 or 2005, they decided it was 90 cents extra per switch, and then a $400,000 tooling cost. And the tooling cost can be allocated over the cost of the machinery that was being used. And so we take the simple equation up here, 2.6 million cars times my 90 cents plus 140,000 equals out to be $2.7 million. Now the actual cost of this recall and the failure cost is $2.7 billion with 64 deaths. So, I mean, that's a lot of money, and then can we put a price on someone's life? I think it's hard. We can't do that. Every life is precious. So if somebody would have looked at the cost in 2005 and said, okay, we can do 2.6 or $2.7 million right now, or in a decade we're going to pay $2.7 billion. Well, if you went to your boss and said, we can do 2.7 now, or 2.7 million now, or 2.7 billion later, well, if you didn't pick the million one, I'm sure you'd be fired today. So GM did not know their failure costs, and so they had to pay.
So I just want to kind of wrap things up a little bit and kind of go over what we already talked about. So we talked about total cost of ownership with your cars, and then we worst practice of their ignition switches and not knowing their total cost. So we kind of want to ask the class just a couple of questions, see if you're paying attention, see what's going on. And so the first one is just, what is total costing? Anyone but Chad know what total costing is?
So it's knowing all the costs that are going to be involved with what you're buying. Not just what the product is itself, but maintenance, transportation costs, things that could go wrong, like trying to account for everything that could happen in the foreseeable future. So.
That's right, just being aware of every cost that could go into the product. Do you have any experiences with total costing? Anyone have anything? Work, personal life, whatever?
Right. Well, my wife convinced me over the break to buy a chinchilla. And she's like, it's just $100 and that's it. But I had to, so that we ended up getting it anyway. But I was trying to explain to her that you have to buy the cage and then you have to buy the food and it lives for up to 15 years. So, you know.
Great example.
I worked for a company that did a lot of cyclical hiring, and when it would get to a really peak hiring time, they'd try and go through like a temp agency to cut their hiring costs. But while it didn't really affect training costs, it usually affected training time and then overall quality. And so the costs there really impacted our returns as well as our turnover. And so we were able to staff the positions a lot faster, but the quality of the staffing, even through the training program, wasn't near where it was. So it would have been cheaper to hire some people that were going to stick rather than 5 people that didn't.
Awesome. Maybe you have one?
Well, I'll do it anyway. In the past, shopping online used to be super cheap compared to brick and mortar. But now you see prices starting to even out. But I've noticed a lot of times when I've been shopping online, you often don't take into consideration the shipping. So you're not doing your costing, and then you get to that checkout point, and your taxes and your shipping costs are all there, and you're going, well, I'm already here, and you click on it anyway. But you know, your total cost hasn't been done there. But you can also total cost your drive to the store to pick up the item as well.
I've totally done that before. Shipping got me every time. So just kind of bring it back to this class of purchasing. Kind of think about why this would be relevant to a purchasing manager, why they would even care. You know, we're in the business to save money, and so by knowing our total cost, we will save. And then our slogan all day today, what happens if you don't know?
Big.
Yep. Does anyone have any questions?